Okay, in this math review video, it's time to take a look at percents and percentages. We've been doing a lot of work with fractions and decimals, and like we've learned in class, percents are basically, they're kind of in the same family. Percents are just another way to write a fraction or a decimal. And if I were to ask you, what does the word percent mean? Remember what we said in class. Percent means out of what? Out of 100. The word literally translated, percent means for every, and per means for every, and cent means 100, like centuries, 100 years, or there's 100 cents in a dollar. So percent kind of means out of 100. So if I gave you a fraction like this and said, I want you to write it as a percent, well, this is 37 hundredths, or 37 out of 100. Percent means out of 100, so 37 hundredths is 37%. Well, that was easy. 99 hundredths, or 99 out of 100, is 99%. Well, I can handle that. 8 hundredths, or 8 out of 100, is 8%. So you can see, when you've got a fraction and the denominator is 100, that's a piece of cake. The percent is just the numerator. So what happens if you have a fraction like these, where it's not out of 100? Well, if the fraction's not out of 100, what do? We make it out of 100, right? So we ask ourselves, 5 times what is 100? Well, 5 times 20. We've got to do the same thing to the numerator. Whatever you do to the bottom, or the denominator, you've got to do to the top, the numerator. 4 times 20 is 80. 80 out of 100. 80 hundredths would be 80%. Okay? 7 tenths. Well, let's make that out of 100. 10 times what is 100? 10 times 10 is 100. Let's do the same thing to the numerator. 7 times 10 is 70. 70 hundredths. 70 out of 100 is 70%. Okay? Now, remember in class, what happens if the fraction cannot be made into 100? At the very end of this video, I'm going to show you how to do that. But for now, let's say, okay, what if I gave you a decimal and said write it as a percentage? Well, a couple ways to do it. The first way is you could change the decimal into a fraction. This is 0.13, or 13 in the hundredths place, right? So really, this is 13 hundredths, which could be written as 13 over 100, 13 hundredths, which is written as 13%. This is 57 in the hundredths place, 57 hundredths, so I could write 57 hundredths, which is 57 out of 100, or 57%. This, well, what is this? What number is this? This is 4 in what place? That's 4 tenths, which I could then make out of 100 by multiplying that by 10 and that by 10, which would give me 40. 40 out of 100 is 40%. So that's one way to do it. We could basically take the decimal, convert it into a fraction, and that'll give me my percent. Or a shorter way, if you have a decimal, all you really have to do is take the decimal point and move it 2 places to the right. So now the decimal would be here, so I'd have 13%. Same answer, just a shorter way to do it. Move the decimal places 2 places, 1, 2, so now the decimal would be here, 57.0, which is the same as 57%. Now this one's a little trickier. How many places do we need to move the decimal? 2 places. So we're going to go 1, 2. So now the decimal would be over here, but I've got an empty spot in here. So I need to basically put a placeholder 0 in there. So what percent is that going to be? That's going to be 40%. Okay? Now, what if we wanted to go backwards? If I gave you the percent and said write it as a decimal, well, again, you could do it 2 ways. I could take it and put it into a fraction, then a decimal. 95% is 95 over 100, which can be written as 95%. 0.95. 39% is the same as 39 over 100, 39 hundredths, which can also be written as a decimal, 0.39, because that's 39 out to the hundredths place. 125%, well, that's 125 over 100, which would then be written as, if we converted this, 100 goes in here, it would be 1.25, okay? Or we can take a look and we can do it backwards. Remember when we did here and we just moved the decimals 2 places to the right? Well, if now I'm going backwards, the decimal would be here. We're just going to move it 2 places to the left. So my decimal would now be 0.95. And I can always put a 0 in front of that, 0.95. The decimal would be here, so let's go 1, 2. So now my decimal would be here, so it's 0.39. And I like to put a 0 in front just so we know that's a decimal. Here's where the decimal would be. So let's go backwards. 1, 2. It would go right in the middle there. 1.25. Okay? So once again, when in review, if you're taking a decimal to a percentage, just move the decimal place over 2 places to the right. And if you're going backwards, if you're starting with the percent and you want to turn it into a decimal, just move the decimal 2 places to the left. And the last thing, we told you, what happens if you have a fraction that you cannot make into 100? Like if I try to do this, okay, 8 times what is 100? Unfortunately, it doesn't work. So that doesn't work. So how do you do that? You take the numerator divided by the denominator. So we're going to take 5 divided by 8. Now that looks a little strange, but that's the way you do it. We're going to add a 0.0, bring the decimal up, and do the division. 8 goes into 50 6 times. Multiplying will give me 48. Subtracting would give me 2. What do I do now? Add another 0, bring it down, and do it again. 8 goes into 20 2 times. Multiplying would give me 16. Subtracting would give me 4. Bring another 0 down, and do it one more time, and now, oh good, it's going to come out evenly. 8 goes into 40 5 times. Multiplying would give me 40, remainder 0. So there's my decimal, 0.625. And remember, from our previous page, if I want to change this into a percentage, I'm going to move the decimal 2 places to the right, so now it would be right here, and I would get 62.5%. 62.5%. So if you ever have a fraction where you can't make it into an equivalent fraction with 100 at the denominator, divide the numerator by the denominator.